She saw everyone ignore the billionaire's deaf daughter until she spoke to her through sign language. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The chandeliers glittered above the ballroom of the Westwood Hotel, scattering light like shattered diamonds over hundreds of polished shoes and sequined gowns. The air carried the faint scent of champagne and expensive perfume. Near the back wall, away from the laughter and the camera flashes, stood a woman in a simple black dress. Her name was Malene Foster, a sign language interpreter hired for the evening's charity gala. She clutched her small work tablet to her chest and tried to blend into the wall, unnoticed. She had been told to stay available in case a guest with hearing loss needed her help, but no one had approached her all night. The donors and executives were far too busy shaking hands and boasting about contributions. Her shoes pinched her feet, but she did not dare remove them. She was painfully aware of how out of place she looked among the gowns that probably cost more than her yearly rent. Then she noticed the girl. The teenager stood alone near a marble column, wearing a midnight blue dress and diamond earrings that sparkled like tiny stars. Her posture was graceful, but her eyes were lonely. Every so often, she smiled politely when someone passed, but no one stopped to speak. Malene felt something twist in her chest. The girl was watching the crowd carefully, focusing on their lips. That detail hit Malene instantly. The girl was deaf. Malene's instincts as an interpreter sharpened. She scanned the room. No one was talking to the girl. People seemed almost afraid of the silence around her. Then, a commotion at the main doors. Jackson Pierce, the tech billionaire who had donated millions to the children's hospital, had arrived. The photographers rushed forward. The music softened. Malene watched as everyone's attention shifted toward him. The girl's gaze followed, her expression tightening. That was when Malene understood the powerful man in the spotlight was her father. The revelation made the air heavier. Malene's heart ached at the distance between them, a distance measured not in feet but in understanding. The girl stood perfectly still, a lonely figure in a room full of noise. Without thinking, Malene stepped forward. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. As she approached, the girl's eyes widened, wary but curious. Malene smiled softly and lifted her hands, forming the familiar signs. "Hello, my name is Malene." The change was instant. The girl's entire face lit up. Her hands moved quickly, graceful and sure. "I am Olivia," she signed. "You know sign language?" "Yes," Malene replied. "I am an interpreter. Are you all right?" Olivia's smile trembled, equal parts relief and disbelief. "No one here talks to me," she signed. "They think I cannot understand." Malene's throat tightened. Around them, the glittering world of wealth continued as if nothing sacred was happening in its corner. Two people, one forgotten and one unnoticed, were finally speaking the same language, and for the first time that night, the silence was not empty, it was beautiful. The moment Malene began signing, something unspoken shifted in the room. Olivia's eyes filled with a brightness that had been missing the entire evening. It was not just surprise, it was recognition, the relief of finally being seen. Her fingers moved gracefully as she responded, and the speed of her hands betrayed how long she had been waiting for someone to talk to her this way. Malene followed every gesture easily, her years of practice guiding her through the fluid rhythm of sign language. "How old are you, Olivia?" Malene asked through her hands. 17, Olivia replied proudly. "I am in my senior year of high school." Malene smiled warmly. "That is wonderful. Do you like school?" The girl's expression faltered. "Not really," she signed. "The hearing students think I am spoiled because of who my father is. The deaf students think I am lucky and do not understand their problems. I do not belong anywhere." Malene's chest tightened. She had seen that look before, the quiet sadness of someone trapped between worlds. "I understand," Malene signed softly. "Sometimes the world does not know what to do with people who are different, but that does not make you wrong." Olivia looked at her for a long moment before a shy smile spread across her face. "You are kind," she signed. "Are you here for my father's event?" "Yes," Malene replied. "I was hired to interpret if anyone needed help, but I think I was really meant to talk to you." Olivia laughed silently, the soundless joy lighting her features. It was the first time Meline saw how beautiful the girl truly was when she smiled. Across the room, the flash of cameras burst like fireworks as Jackson Pierce posed with city officials and corporate sponsors. The crowd's applause echoed through the ballroom, and a wave of noise rolled over them. Olivia's face changed instantly. Her gaze shifted toward her father, her posture tightening again. Meline noticed the way her hands lowered, almost defensively. "You can go talk to him," Meline suggested gently. Olivia shook her head. "He is too busy," she signed. "He always is. He says he loves me, but he never has time to learn my language." Meline felt her throat close. The sentence hung heavy between them. "Have you tried to teach him?" she asked. Olivia nodded once. "When I was little, I used to sign 'I love you' every night. He used to smile but never answered back. After my mother died, he stopped looking at me when I signed. He hired interpreters instead." Meline's heart broke a little at those words. The chandeliers shimmered above them, scattering reflections of gold and silver on the polished marble. All around, laughter and conversation filled the space. But here in the corner, the silence carried more weight than any sound. "Olivia," Meline signed carefully, "you deserve to be heard. Even if he does not sign, he still needs to see you. Maybe he has forgotten how." Olivia looked uncertain. "Maybe," she replied, "but it hurts to try when you know someone will not look." For a moment, Meline wanted to reach out and hug the girl, but she restrained herself. Instead, she simply signed, "Sometimes people forget the things that matter. They need someone to remind them." Olivia glanced at her father again, his tall figure framed by a sea of admirers. "Do you think he could change?" she asked quietly. "I think anyone can change if they want to," Meline signed. "Even powerful people." Just then, a woman in a sleek grey suit approached, her professional smile tight. "Excuse me," she said out loud, clearly addressing Meline. "Mr. Pierce's daughter is not available for conversation. She has a schedule to follow." Olivia's shoulders tensed, her earlier warmth replaced by embarrassment. Meline straightened, her own voice calm but steady. "I was just talking with her." The assistant's smile did not reach her eyes. "Yes, well, she needs to prepare for the next part of the event. Thank you for understanding." Olivia's fingers twitched with frustration. "It is fine," she signed quickly. "You should go." Meline hesitated. She wanted to protest, to stand up for her, but she knew this was not the time. She gave a gentle nod and signed, "It was nice meeting you, Olivia. Remember what I said?" Olivia nodded back, her lips forming the words silently. "Thank you." As Meline turned away, the applause grew louder. Jackson Pierce was stepping up to the stage, his voice confident and smooth as he began his speech about innovation and compassion. From where she stood, Meline glanced back once more. Olivia was standing perfectly still, watching her father with eyes full of quiet longing. She was surrounded by noise, by wealth, by every luxury money could buy, and yet she had never looked more alone. Meline felt something deep inside her shift, a silent promise forming in her heart. If the world refused to listen to this girl, she would. She did not know it yet, but that single choice would change more than one life before the night was over. The applause continued to echo through the ballroom as Jackson Pierce concluded his speech, his deep voice steady and confident. Words like innovation, progress, and generosity rolled easily off his tongue, earning nods and admiration from the crowd. Yet somewhere near the back of the room, Meline watched in silence, her thoughts heavy with what she had just witnessed. She had seen two completely different worlds exist within the same room, the father adored by everyone, and the daughter invisible to him. When the music resumed and guests began to mingle again, Meline quietly slipped toward the exit, her heart still echoing with Olivia's last words. But before she reached the doors, she heard a soft, trembling voice call out behind her. "Wait." She turned. Olivia was standing near the column again, her hands fidgeting nervously. The assistant was gone. Meline approached slowly. "Are you all right?" she asked gently, using both her voice and her hands so Olivia could follow her lips. Olivia's eyes shimmered with uncertainty. "Can I ask you something?" she signed. "Of course." "Do you think my father ever really loved my mother?" Meline froze. The question was so unexpected, so raw, that for a moment she could not find her voice. "Why do you ask that?" Olivia's gaze drifted toward the stage where Jackson was shaking hands with another executive. "Because after she died, he changed. He stopped listening. He stopped trying. Sometimes I think he loved what she gave him more than who she was. The honesty in those words cut deep. Malene stepped closer, lowering her voice. Maybe he did love her. Maybe losing her made him forget how to love at all. Olivia's lips parted in surprise, and for the first time, she looked at Malene not just with curiosity but with understanding. "You sound like my mother used to," she sighed softly. "She always said people forget kindness when life gets too loud." Malene smiled faintly. "Then maybe tonight is the night someone reminds him." The girl blinked as if the idea was too far-fetched to believe. Before she could reply, a photographer approached, aiming his camera at Jackson and calling for a family shot. Jackson turned toward his daughter, gesturing for her to come forward. Olivia stiffened instantly. Her hands trembled. "He just wants the picture," she signed, her expression guarded. "He does not even know what to say to me." Malene touched her arm lightly. "Then let him see who you are. You do not have to say anything." Slowly, Olivia walked toward her father. Jackson gave her a polished smile, one meant for cameras, not for her. As the flash went off, she kept her chin high, her eyes calm but distant. Malene could see the invisible wall between them, built not of pride, but of pain. After the photos ended, Jackson turned back to his guests, dismissing Olivia with a distracted nod. The crowd moved again, and Malene watched as the girl quietly slipped away from the spotlight. Her small act of courage had gone unseen. Later that evening, as the event began to wind down, Malene found herself on the terrace outside, breathing in the cool night air. The sound of laughter floated through the glass doors behind her, but out here, it was peaceful. She leaned on the railing, staring at the city lights below. She did not hear the footsteps until Olivia appeared beside her, holding a small clutch purse and looking lost in thought. "I needed air," Olivia signed, her movements slower now. "It is too loud inside." "I know," Malene replied with a soft smile. "The world can be loud even when you cannot hear it." Olivia laughed silently at that, a tiny spark of joy returning. "You really understand," she signed. "I try to," Malene said. "But I think you teach me more than I teach you." Olivia's smile faded slightly. "I wish my father could understand that too." She hesitated, then reached into her purse, pulling out a small photograph. It was old and slightly worn, showing a woman at a piano, her hands frozen mid-play, her smile radiant. "This was my mum," Olivia signed, holding it out carefully. "She was a pianist. She used to make me feel music through her touch. After she died, my father never played her music again." Malene looked at the photograph, her eyes softening. "She looks kind," she said. "She was," Olivia signed. "She used to say that love is like sound. You cannot see it, but you can feel it if you listen the right way." The words lingered between them like music only they could hear. Inside, the music changed to a slow waltz, and Jackson's laughter echoed faintly through the doors. Malene turned toward the light-filled ballroom, a thought forming quietly in her heart. "Maybe it is time someone helps him listen again," she whispered. Olivia looked at her, uncertain but hopeful, as if she could sense that something was about to begin. In that moment, the night no longer felt heavy. It felt like a beginning. The night after the gala, the city slept beneath a soft drizzle that blurred the streetlights into halos of gold. Malene sat in her small apartment, replaying the moments from the evening over and over in her mind. The image of Olivia standing beside her father, trying so hard to smile, haunted her. There was something about that girl's quiet dignity that refused to fade. She placed her cup of chamomile tea on the table and rubbed her temples. She had worked at countless events before, but this one had left her unsettled. For the first time, she felt that her job had led her to something bigger than translation. It had led her into a story that needed to be healed. At the same time, across town, Jackson Pierce sat alone in his penthouse office. The city skyline reflected on the floor-to-ceiling windows. The gala had been a success, at least on paper. The donations had exceeded expectations. The press had praised his leadership, and investors had left satisfied. Yet, as he stared at the empty glass in his hand, he felt nothing but a quiet ache he could not name. His assistant had mentioned briefly that Olivia had been quiet all evening, but that was nothing new. She was always quiet. Still, an image flashed uninvited in his mind the moment his daughter had smiled when she was talking to that woman in the black dress. It was not the polite, distant smile she gave to photographers. It was real. It had life in it. Jackson leaned back in his chair, confused by the strange discomfort that followed. He realized with a start that he could not remember the last time he had made his daughter smile like that. In the following days, life returned to its usual rhythm. Meline continued her interpreting work at the hospital, moving from patient rooms to therapy sessions. She liked her job because it allowed her to bridge worlds, to help people who had been silenced find a voice. Yet, every time she saw a child signing to a parent who tried awkwardly to respond, she thought of Olivia and her father. One afternoon, while taking a lunch break near the hospital courtyard, her phone buzzed. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello, this is Meline." The voice on the other end was deep and measured. "Miss Foster, this is Jackson Pierce. I hope I am not interrupting your work." Her heart skipped. "Mr. Pierce? No, not at all. How did you get my number?" "Your agency recommended you," he said. "You were the interpreter at the gala, correct?" "Yes, I was," she replied cautiously. There was a short silence. "I wanted to thank you," Jackson said finally, "for speaking with my daughter that night. She mentioned you." Meline blinked, caught off guard. "She did?" "Yes." She seemed lighter after the event, happier. That is rare. Jackson's tone softened slightly, and for the first time, she heard something human beneath the polished calm. "I wanted to ask if you would consider meeting again. I have been thinking about learning sign language." Meline was quiet for a moment, surprised by his honesty. "That is a wonderful idea, Mr. Pierce. It would mean a lot to her." "I am not sure I will be very good at it," he admitted, "but I would like to try." Meline smiled, though he could not see it. "Everyone starts somewhere. Can we begin tomorrow evening? My schedule is open after 7. She agreed, and after ending the call, she sat for a long time in the quiet courtyard, her thoughts racing. It was the first sign of change, small but real. That night, Olivia sat in her bedroom sketching by the glow of a small desk lamp. Her drawings were full of movement and light, something between art and emotion. When her father knocked on the door, she looked up in surprise. He rarely came to her room. "I wanted to tell you something," Jackson said, speaking slowly, his words deliberate. "I called Meline. I asked her to teach me sign language." Olivia stared at him, unsure if she had understood. "Really?" she signed, her hands trembling slightly. Jackson nodded, then raised his hand awkwardly, shaping the first letter of her name with visible effort. It was clumsy, imperfect, but unmistakable. Olivia's breath caught in her chest. For a moment, she simply watched him, her eyes filling with tears. Then, slowly, she smiled, not the polite one for cameras, but the same warm smile that had caught Meline's attention that night. "You did it," she signed. "You tried." Jackson exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time in years. "I will keep trying," he said quietly, and for the first time since her mother's passing, Olivia believed him. Far away, Meline looked out her apartment window, unaware of the change she had already set in motion. The city below glimmered like 1,000 tiny promises, and somewhere among them, one heart had finally begun to listen. The following evening, Meline arrived at the Pierce residence just as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the glass towers of the city in shades of rose and gold. She stood at the base of the long marble staircase, feeling small in the grand entryway, her reflection shimmering faintly across the polished floor. The butler led her to the library where Jackson waited. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old books, with tall shelves climbing up to the ceiling and a fire crackling quietly in the fireplace. Jackson stood near the window, his usual suit replaced by a dark sweater and slacks. The change made him seem less like a billionaire and more like a man uncertain of himself. "Miss Foster," he greeted, offering a handshake. "Thank you for coming. Please call me Meline," she replied with a polite smile. "You mentioned you wanted to start learning tonight." "Yes," he said, motioning toward the table where a notepad and pen were waiting. "I do not know where to begin." "We can start simple," Meline suggested. She set her bag down and gestured gently. "Before we begin with the alphabet or words, I want you to remember that sign language is not just about hands. It is about eyes, expressions, and presence. You have to listen with your heart, not your ears." Jackson nodded, his usual confidence replaced by quiet focus. Meline demonstrated the alphabet slowly, her movements deliberate and graceful. He followed, his large hands awkward at first, fingers stumbling over shapes. When he finally managed the letter O, he gave a small, almost boyish smile that surprised her. "That is it," she said warmly. "It takes time, but you are doing great." They practiced for nearly an hour. Meline corrected his hand placement, guiding his fingers gently when needed. Each time, Jackson watched closely, as if trying to memorize not only the movement but the meaning behind it. After some time, she asked him to spell his daughter's name. He tried, fumbling slightly before forming Olivia. When he succeeded, Meline clapped softly. "Perfect. You just spelled the most important word in your life." Jackson looked at his hands for a long moment. "It feels strange," he admitted. "I have run companies, signed deals, spoken to thousands of people, but I never learned the language of my own child." His voice softened, laced with regret. Meline hesitated, sensing that this was not a moment to fill with sympathy but with understanding. "You are learning now," she said simply. "That matters." Jackson nodded slowly, as though absorbing the truth in her words. They continued until Olivia appeared quietly at the doorway. She must have heard the faint sound of laughter because her eyes were wide with surprise. "Dad?" she signed hesitantly. Jackson turned, then raised his hands carefully. "Hi, Olivia," he signed back, his fingers shaky but clear. For a second, the world seemed to stop. Olivia's face broke into a radiant smile as she signed back. "You learned this?" "Meline helped me," he signed, glancing toward the interpreter. "She is teaching me so we can talk without anyone else." Olivia's eyes shimmered with emotion, and before he could react, she ran across the room and hugged him. Jackson froze for a heartbeat, then wrapped his arms around her tightly, his jaw tightening as emotion caught in his throat. Meline looked away, giving them privacy, her own eyes burning. It was a small, fragile beginning, but it was real. After a few moments, Jackson cleared his throat, regaining composure. "Would you like to show me more?" he asked Olivia gently. The girl nodded eagerly, moving beside Meline to demonstrate a few basic signs. "Thank you, love, family." Jackson repeated each one with care. When he shaped the word love, Olivia corrected his hand softly and whispered with her lips, "Like this." He tried again, slower this time, and she nodded proudly. Meline could feel the warmth spreading through the room like sunlight through glass. For the first time, silence did not feel empty here. When the lesson ended, Meline gathered her things. Jackson walked her to the door, his voice low. "I do not know how to thank you for this." "You just did," she said with a soft smile. "Keep learning. That is thanks enough." As she stepped out into the cool night, Meline glanced back once more. Through the large windows, she saw father and daughter sitting together, their hands moving in small, clumsy gestures that meant more than any words could. And for the first time in a long while, she believed in quiet miracles. The following week became a quiet rhythm of change in the Pierce household. Each evening, Meline arrived at the same time, greeted by the butler who now smiled at her with genuine warmth instead of the polite detachment he had shown before. The lessons had become something more than instruction. They were slowly rebuilding a bridge that had long been broken. On the third evening, Meline found Olivia waiting at the library table, her sketchbook open and pencils scattered around. The drawings were beautiful, delicate portraits of hands forming signs, lines that seemed to move across the page with emotion. "You have real talent," Meline said sincerely as she placed her bag down. Olivia smiled shyly, signing, "Thank you. I draw what I cannot say." Meline nodded, her heart tightening. Jackson entered a few minutes later, his sleeves rolled up, carrying 3 cups of tea. "I thought we might need a break from coffee," he said, setting the cups down. The gesture was small, but it made both women smile. They began their lesson, starting with new words: hope, trust, forgive. Jackson struggled at first, his fingers hesitating, but Olivia guided him patiently, correcting each sign with gentle laughter. "You are getting better," Meline said after a while. "Your movements are smoother." "Only because my teachers are kind," Jackson replied. The words carried a rare softness that filled the room. When the lesson ended, Olivia showed her father one of her sketches. It was of 2 hands meeting in the middle of a white space, one small and one larger, with the sign for family drawn between them. Jackson stared at it for a long moment, before saying quietly, "This is beautiful." "It is us," Olivia signed. "You and me." Jackson swallowed hard. "I would like to frame this," he said, and when she nodded, he carefully set the drawing aside, his expression thoughtful. Later that night, after Meline left, Jackson lingered in the library long after everyone had gone to bed. He sat by the fire, staring at the framed photograph of his late wife on the mantel. Her gentle eyes seemed to look back at him with silent understanding. "You would have liked her," he whispered, thinking of Maline's patience and warmth. "You always said people show their strength in quiet ways." The fire crackled softly, filling the silence that once would have been unbearable. For the first time in years, it felt peaceful. Meanwhile, Maline walked home under the cool night air, feeling something she had not felt in a long time: purpose. She had taught many people before, but what was happening inside that house went beyond language. It was healing. The next evening, during their session, a small accident broke the pattern. Olivia was teaching her father how to sign the phrase, "I am proud of you," when her bracelet, a thin silver chain, slipped off her wrist and landed near the fireplace. Jackson bent to pick it up and paused, noticing a small engraving on the inside. "M.F.," he read aloud. "My mother gave it to me," Olivia explained quickly, signing fast. Her name was Margaret Foster. The coincidence made Maline freeze. "Foster?" she asked carefully. Olivia nodded. "Yes. Why?" Jackson looked between them, sensing the shift in energy. "That is your last name, is it not, Maline?" Maline hesitated, her voice quiet. "It is, but Foster is a common name." Yet something inside her stirred. She had grown up hearing stories about her grandmother, Margaret Foster, a pianist who had played in charity events decades ago before she passed away. The details aligned too perfectly. Olivia looked puzzled, unaware of the storm forming in Maline's thoughts. "It could just be coincidence," Jackson said gently, though his tone carried curiosity. "Perhaps," Maline agreed, forcing a smile. She quickly redirected the lesson, but her hands trembled slightly as she signed the next phrase. Later that night, long after she left the mansion, Maline sat at her desk, staring at an old photograph she kept tucked inside her journal. It showed her grandmother standing beside a piano, smiling in the same soft, luminous way Olivia had described her mother. A chill moved through her as she whispered to herself, "What if we are connected in ways none of us knew?" The rain began to fall outside, light but steady, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, the same melody from the gala played faintly from a nearby apartment, a tune that once belonged to a woman named Margaret Foster, whose music might still be tying two families together without them realizing it yet. The following morning arrived, grey and quiet, the kind of day that carried secrets in its air. Maline woke early, her mind still circling the discovery from the night before. The initials on Olivia's bracelet, the stories about her own grandmother, and the way Jackson had looked at her when he realized the coincidence, it all felt like more than chance. She tried to dismiss the thought, convincing herself it was impossible, yet her intuition whispered otherwise. She spent most of the day at the hospital interpreting for a pediatric patient who used sign language, but even as she worked, her thoughts drifted back to the Pierces. That evening, when she arrived for another lesson, the air in the mansion felt different. It was quieter, heavier somehow. Olivia was already in the library, doodling absent-mindedly in her sketchbook. Jackson stood near the piano that had not been played in years, his hand resting lightly on the lid. When he saw Maline, he gave a faint smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "I was hoping you might help me with something tonight," he said. "Of course," Maline replied, setting her bag down. "What would you like to learn?" "Not a sign," Jackson said slowly. "A song." Maline blinked, unsure what he meant. "Olivia told me her mother used to play something called the Silent Waltz," Jackson explained. "It was written for her by her mother, Margaret Foster. I found the sheet music this morning. It was tucked inside an old drawer." The name sent a shock through Maline, but she kept her expression neutral. "I know the piece," she said softly. "My grandmother composed it." Jackson's eyes lifted to hers, and for a long moment, they simply stared at each other as realization dawned. "Your grandmother?" he repeated. "Yes," she said quietly. "Margaret Foster was my grandmother. I grew up hearing stories about her music. My mother said she played for charity galas, including one for the Children's Hospital decades ago." Olivia looked between them, her hands hovering mid-air. "Are we related?" She signed quickly, half in shock, half in wonder. Maline hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I do not know," she admitted, "but it seems our families have crossed paths before." Jackson sat down slowly, processing the revelation. "She must have known my wife," he said finally. Margaret taught her piano when she was a teenager. That is how she fell in love with music. His voice softened with memory. When she passed away, she left that piano to Olivia. Malene felt a lump in her throat. The connection was undeniable now, a thread stretching across generations. "Then your wife was one of the last students my grandmother ever had," she whispered. Jackson nodded, his gaze distant. "I suppose fate is not finished with us yet." Olivia smiled shyly, signing. "It means Grandma's music brought you here." Malene's heart swelled at the thought. "Yes," she signed back. "Maybe this was meant to happen." Jackson gestured toward the piano. "Would you play it?" he asked. "I do not know if I remember," she said hesitantly. "You will," he replied. "If it was her song, it will come back to you." Malene sat on the bench, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the lid. The keys were smooth, cool under her fingertips. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were uncertain, fragile like a memory half forgotten, but soon the melody bloomed, soft and haunting. The music filled the room like light through a window, weaving through silence until even the air seemed to listen. Olivia stood near her father, eyes glistening as she placed a hand over her heart. Jackson closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt his late wife's presence not as pain, but as peace. When the final chord faded, none of them spoke. The silence afterward was full of meaning. Olivia wiped her eyes and signed, "That was Mom's song. I could feel it." Malene smiled through her tears. "Music does not need sound to be heard," she said softly. Jackson looked at her, emotion flickering across his face. "Your grandmother's music healed her once," he said. "Now it is healing us." Malene lowered her hands to her lap, humbled by the strange beauty of it all. "Maybe kindness does not disappear," she said. "Maybe it just waits for the right moment to return." The fire crackled gently beside them, the melody of the silent waltz, still lingering in the air like an echo of love that refused to fade. None of them noticed how perfectly the old piano had come back to life that night, as if it, too, had been waiting for forgiveness. The days that followed were filled with a sense of calm that none of them had expected. The discovery of their family's shared past had changed the rhythm of their meetings. It was no longer just about learning signs or rebuilding lost connections. It had become something deeper, a quiet exchange of hope between three souls bound by coincidence and kindness. Jackson was different now. The man who once lived through schedules and screens began to move slower, listening more, speaking less. He often found himself in the library with Olivia, practicing the signs Malene had taught them, their hands moving clumsily but full of patience. Sometimes they laughed at his mistakes, and sometimes they simply sat in silence, letting understanding speak louder than words. One evening, when Malene arrived for their regular lesson, Olivia greeted her with a drawing of all three of them sitting by the piano. Beneath it, she had written in careful handwriting, "Family is not who shares your name, but who shares your heart." The words nearly brought tears to Malene's eyes. "That is beautiful, Olivia," she said softly. Jackson nodded, his expression full of quiet pride. "She has her mother's heart," he said, "and maybe a little of her grandmother's music." That night, their lesson turned into something unplanned. Malene taught them to sign the phrase, "I forgive you." Olivia practiced it a few times before turning to her father and signing it directly to him. Jackson froze, emotion flickering across his face. "Why are you saying that to me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia's fingers moved slowly, her eyes shining with honesty. "Because you tried," she signed. "Because I know you are sorry even when you do not say it." Jackson reached for her hand, unable to speak. Malene watched, her throat tight, as father and daughter found a language that did not need sound to carry love. After Olivia went to bed, Jackson stayed behind, staring at the fire. "Do you ever wonder," he asked Malene quietly, "how life finds ways to give us second chances?" "All the time," she said. "I think sometimes it uses people to remind us what we have forgotten." He looked at her then, his eyes soft in the firelight. "You were that reminder," he said. "You walked into our lives when we did not even know we needed saving." Malene felt her heart stir but said nothing. There was something sacred about the silence that followed, something that did not need to be defined. The next day, Malene returned to the hospital for her interpreting work. As she passed the children's wing, she noticed a small girl signing to her nurse with bright determination. The scene made her smile. Language, she thought, was not about sound, it was about connection. That evening, as she prepared to leave, She received a text from Jackson. Olivia is performing her mother's song at the charity gala next week. She would like you to come. The message made her pause. She could almost hear the melody in her mind, the same song her grandmother had written decades ago, now living again through a girl who could not hear it, but could feel it. When the night of the gala arrived, the ballroom glowed with soft golden light, much like the first night they had met. But everything felt different now. The same chandeliers sparkled above, yet there was warmth in the air that had not been there before. Olivia sat at the piano, her hands poised gracefully on the keys. Jackson stood nearby, his posture proud but gentle, his eyes never leaving his daughter. When she began to play, the room fell silent. The notes were delicate, flowing like a whisper through the crowd. People listened, not with their ears but with their hearts. Near the center of the room, Malene felt tears rise as she watched Olivia's face glow with peace. Jackson's hands moved slightly, signing the word, beautiful. Olivia saw him and smiled, her fingers answering, "Thank you, Dad." When the song ended, the applause was thunderous, but Jackson did not hear it. All he saw was his daughter turning toward him with love shining in her eyes. Malene knew, in that moment, that redemption did not arrive with grand gestures. It arrived in small acts of courage, in words unspoken but deeply felt. As the applause echoed around them, she whispered to herself, "Sometimes, kindness does not change the world. It simply reminds someone how to love again." And that night, love, in its quietest form, had finally come home. After the gala, the city seemed quieter somehow, as if the music from that night still lingered in the air, soft and forgiving. The performance had gone viral within hours, with clips shared online under titles like "The Billionaire's Daughter Who Played Her Mother's Song Without Hearing It." For the first time, the world saw Olivia not as a symbol of wealth, but as a symbol of grace. Reporters praised her courage, her father's emotional reaction, and the way the song seemed to heal something invisible between them. Yet, inside the Pierce home, it was not fame that filled the air, it was peace. Olivia glowed with a confidence she had never shown before, and Jackson, once consumed by meetings and deadlines, had begun to build his days around her instead of his calendar. Each morning, they practiced new signs together over breakfast, laughing at their mistakes and celebrating small victories. Malene continued to visit, not as an employee now but as a friend. The lessons had shifted naturally into conversations about life, music, and kindness. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Olivia showed Malene a new sketch. It was of two women standing by a piano, one older, one younger, with the words, "Echoes of Love," written beneath. "It is for you and Grandma Margaret," she signed proudly, "because without you, I would not have known her music." Malene's throat tightened. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "Your grandmother would have loved you." Jackson, who was standing nearby, pruning the roses, looked up. "I think she already does," he said, his tone warm but thoughtful. Over time, the walls that had once surrounded the Pierce mansion began to fall away. Jackson started visiting the children's hospital where Malene worked, funding a new program that provided free sign language interpreters for families. He told reporters it was Olivia's idea, but everyone knew he meant it from the heart. On one of those visits, Jackson and Olivia watched Malene interpret for a young boy who had just received a cochlear implant. When the boy's mother signed, "I love you," for the first time, and he responded with a smile, Jackson felt a lump rise in his throat. He turned to Malene. "This is what your work does," he said quietly. "It gives people their voices back." Malene nodded. "Everyone deserves to be heard," she replied. That evening, as they left the hospital, the sky was streaked with shades of orange and violet. Olivia walked between them, holding both their hands. Jackson glanced at Malene, gratitude etched across his face. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to believe power meant control, that if I worked hard enough, earned enough, I could fix everything." He paused, looking at his daughter. "But you and Olivia taught me that power means listening. It means showing up, even when you do not know what to say." Malene smiled gently. "Sometimes, silence says what words cannot." Olivia squeezed both their hands, signing, "You both talk too much," before breaking into a silent laugh that made them laugh too. The soundless joy of that moment felt like the purest music. Later that night, as Malene prepared to leave, Jackson stopped her at the door. "You have done more for us than you know," he said. I used to think redemption was a word for religion or stories. Now I know it just means learning how to love again. Meline met his gaze, her heart calm but full. And love, she said, is the only language everyone understands. Jackson nodded, his expression thoughtful. Stay for dinner, he said suddenly. It is just us tonight. No meetings, no guests, just family. The word family hung in the air, simple yet heavy with meaning. Meline hesitated for only a moment before smiling. I would like that. Inside, Olivia was setting the table, humming a tune she could not hear but could feel. The chandelier above cast a soft glow over their small gathering, the kind of light that made everything look gentler. For the first time, they were not teacher and student, billionaire and interpreter, or father and daughter learning to bridge silence. They were simply people, bound by compassion and chance. And in that quiet, the world outside seemed to pause, as if it too was listening to the soundless song of healing being played in the heart of one house. Weeks passed, and the quiet rhythm of their lives settled into something beautifully ordinary. The Pierce mansion, once a place of distance and echoes, had become a home filled with laughter and light. The library where they used to practice sign language now held stacks of drawings, half-finished lessons, and coffee mugs left behind after late-night talks. Meline had stopped feeling like a visitor. She came and went as naturally as the evening breeze, sometimes staying for dinner, sometimes joining Olivia in sketching by the piano. Jackson had changed too. His schedule, once carved in stone, now had space for breakfast with his daughter and long walks in the garden. One morning, as he sat with Olivia reviewing the hand signs for emotions, he signed clumsily, "Happy." Olivia grinned and corrected him gently. "You have to smile when you sign it," she said aloud, her voice soft but clear from years of speech therapy. Jackson smiled wide and tried again. "Happy," he signed, his face lighting up. "Perfect," she signed back, laughing. Meline watched from the doorway, her heart swelling at the sight. There was something quietly powerful about a man learning to express himself in silence. Later that day, Jackson asked Meline to join him in his study. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting warm stripes of light across the shelves. "I have been thinking," he said, pouring 2 cups of tea, "about the work you do and what it means. You help people find their voices, even when the world refuses to listen." Meline smiled faintly. "It is what I love. Communication should belong to everyone." Jackson nodded slowly. "I want to expand the hospital program we started. Not just interpreters, but scholarships for children with hearing loss, teachers, technology, everything they need to connect." Meline blinked, surprised. "That is incredible," she said. "Olivia will be proud." "It was her idea," he admitted, his eyes softening. She said, "If people can hear my story, maybe they will listen to others too." Meline felt a lump rise in her throat. "She is her mother's daughter," she said quietly. Jackson nodded, staring into his cup. "And maybe," he added, "I am finally becoming the father she deserved." There was silence then, the kind that did not feel heavy but full. He looked up at Meline. "You have given us both more than you know." She shook her head gently. "You found your way back on your own. I just showed you the path." "Sometimes that is the hardest thing to find," he said. Before either of them could say more, Olivia appeared at the door holding a small envelope. "Dad," she signed, "this came for you." Jackson opened it and unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten letter from the hospital director, confirming that the Pierce Foundation's new communication program had been officially approved. Olivia's eyes widened with joy as she read the letter over his shoulder. "We did it," she signed excitedly. Jackson laughed, pulling her into a hug. "We did it," he signed back. Meline smiled, watching them celebrate. That evening, they invited her to stay for dinner again. The meal was simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and Olivia's favorite chocolate cake, but it felt like a feast. Between bites and laughter, they talked about dreams for the future. Olivia wanted to start an art therapy group for deaf children. Jackson wanted to build a new wing at the hospital named after his late wife and Margaret Foster, honoring both women whose love had shaped their lives. Meline listened quietly, humbled by how far they had come. When the meal ended, Olivia insisted they play a game of charades, signing clues while her father guessed. They laughed until tears filled their eyes. In the middle of that laughter, Meline looked around the table and realized something beautiful. The journey that began in silence had led them here to connection, to forgiveness, to love that spoke without sound. As the night drew to a close, Jackson raised his glass and signed, "To kindness, the language that never needs translation." Malene signed back, "To love, the sound that never fades." Olivia watched them, her hands resting over her heart. In that moment, the world outside the mansion disappeared, leaving only the warmth of family and the soft echo of happiness that needed no words at all. The following morning dawned bright and crisp, sunlight spilling through the windows of the Pierce home like a promise. Olivia was the first to wake, her energy infectious as she hurried down the stairs. She found her father already at the dining table, papers spread out beside his coffee cup. When he saw her, he smiled and set the papers aside. "Good morning," he signed slowly, still practicing. Olivia beamed and signed back, "Good morning, Dad." Their movements were no longer hesitant or awkward. They flowed with the natural rhythm of understanding. Jackson had learned not just the shapes of words, but the patience of silence. Malene arrived later that morning, carrying a small box wrapped neatly in brown paper. "What is that?" Olivia signed curiously. Malene smiled. "A little surprise," she said, "but you have to finish breakfast first." After they ate, Malene set the box on the piano and untied the ribbon. Inside was a framed photograph of 3 generations of women. Margaret Foster, the renowned pianist, stood beside her daughter in the photo, both smiling proudly at a much younger Malene sitting on a piano bench. "I found it in one of my old boxes last night," Malene explained. "I thought maybe it belonged here now." Jackson studied the photograph carefully. The resemblance between Margaret and his late wife was undeniable. "It is beautiful," he said softly. Olivia reached out, tracing her fingers along the glass before signing. "Family." The word felt right, complete. They placed the photograph on the mantel, beside the framed sketch Olivia had drawn weeks earlier. The 2 images seemed to belong together, as if the past and present had finally found peace. Later that afternoon, Jackson drove them to the hospital to attend the official launch of the new communication program. Reporters and families gathered in the courtyard, the same place where Malene had once interpreted between a mother and her young son. This time, she stood beside Jackson on stage, Olivia proudly at her side. Jackson spoke to the crowd, his voice steady and heartfelt. "When I first started this foundation," he began, "I thought success was measured by numbers, dollars raised, buildings built, programs launched. But I have learned that success is measured by something far quieter, the ability to listen." He paused, glancing toward his daughter. "My daughter taught me that language is not made of sound, but of understanding. Today, we are not just opening a program, we are opening doors." Olivia smiled proudly, signing the words as her father spoke. The audience watched in silence, many wiping tears from their eyes. When he finished, the applause was long and warm. Malene stepped forward and signed a simple phrase toward the audience, her hands moving gracefully. "Everyone deserves to be heard." The crowd responded with a wave of clapping hands, the sign language gesture for applause. The soundless celebration was more powerful than noise. After the ceremony, families approached them one by one, thanking them for the program. A little girl with hearing aids tugged at Olivia's sleeve and signed shyly, "You are my hero." Olivia blushed, her eyes bright with happiness. "Thank you," she signed back. Jackson watched his daughter interact with the children, pride softening his expression. Malene stood beside him, feeling the same warmth. "You did it," she said quietly. "No," he replied, shaking his head. "We did it." As the crowd began to disperse, Jackson turned to Malene. "There is something I have wanted to ask," he said, his tone thoughtful. "Now that this program is running, I would like you to stay on as its director. No one understands this mission better than you." Malene's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Completely," he said. "It was your heart that started this. It should be your hands that guide it." She hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Then, yes, I would be honored." Olivia clapped her hands together, grinning. "That means you will be with us even more." She signed excitedly. Malene laughed softly. "I guess it does." The 3 of them stood together in the courtyard as the sun began to set, painting the sky with gold and lavender. The light reflected in the hospital windows, creating a shimmering glow that seemed to bless everything it touched. For a long moment, none of them spoke. They did not need to. In the quiet evening air, surrounded by the soundless applause of gratitude, they knew they had found something greater than success, connection, redemption, and the kind of love that could be heard even in silence. The weeks after the launch of the program moved gently, like chapters of a story that finally learned to breathe. The foundation grew faster than anyone had expected. Donations arrived from across the country. Letters poured in from families, thanking the Pierces for giving their children a voice, and the hospital's new wing began construction before the first leaves of autumn had even turned gold. Jackson worked long hours overseeing the expansion, but it no longer consumed him. Now, he balanced his time carefully, making sure every evening ended at home, at the dinner table with Olivia and Malene. Their evenings became a ritual. Olivia would sign new phrases she learned from her online classes. Jackson would test his memory by answering them, and Malene would laugh softly whenever he mixed up two signs. They were not perfect, but they were whole. One Friday night, as the first chill of fall touched the air, Malene arrived later than usual. She had spent the afternoon finalizing interpreter training sessions at the hospital and was still holding the stack of folders in her arms when Olivia opened the door. "You are late," Olivia signed, pretending to scold her. Malene grinned. "I brought work," she said, "and good news." Jackson appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron and holding a wooden spoon. The sight made Malene laugh. "You cook now?" she teased. "Do not look so surprised," he said, smiling. "It is Olivia's favorite soup. I promised her I would learn." Olivia nodded proudly and signed. He only burned it once. The house filled with the scent of rosemary and roasted tomatoes, a warmth that reminded Malene of home. They ate together at the long oak table while the fireplace crackled softly behind them. After dinner, Jackson poured tea and handed Malene a small envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "Something we have all been talking about," he said. "Open it." Inside was an invitation printed on heavy paper. "Annual Foster Memorial Concert," it read. "Honoring the legacy of Margaret Foster to benefit the Pierce Communication Foundation." Malene looked up, eyes wide. "You are hosting this?" Jackson nodded. "It was Olivia's idea. She wanted to celebrate your grandmother's music again, and this time for a cause that carries her spirit." Olivia signed. "It is your turn to play the piano." Malene blinked in surprise. "Me?" Olivia nodded again, her hands moving quickly. "Grandma's music started all of this. You should be the one to bring it back." Jackson smiled. "We already chose the song." He gestured toward the piano in the corner, where a single sheet of music rested. The title read, "The Silent Waltz." Malene's throat tightened. "I do not know if I can," she whispered. "You can," Jackson said softly. "You played it once for us and changed everything. Now it is time to let the world hear it." That night, long after they said goodnight, Malene sat alone at the piano. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Her fingers hovered above the keys, unsure, until she thought of her grandmother's smile, of Olivia's courage, and of Jackson's quiet faith. Slowly, she began to play. The melody filled the room, soft and gentle, like the heartbeat of something eternal. Each note carried the story of loss, of love, and of rediscovery. She played not just for them, but for everyone who had ever lived in silence. When the final note faded, Malene sat still for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. Behind her, she heard the faint sound of applause. She turned to see Jackson and Olivia standing by the doorway, both smiling. "It was perfect," Jackson said quietly. Olivia signed. "Grandma would be proud." Malene looked at them, her heart full. "No," she said softly. "She would be grateful, because her music finally found its home." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, scattering a few golden leaves across the terrace. The sound was faint but steady, like the echo of the song lingering in the air, promising that some stories never end. They simply change form and keep playing in the hearts that remember them. The night of the concert arrived under a sky scattered with soft winter stars. The city lights shimmered across the river, and the grand hall of the old theater glowed like a lantern against the dark. People filled every seat, their murmurs fading into a respectful hush as the stage lights brightened. At the center of the stage stood a single piano, polished until it reflected the glow of the chandeliers. The event banner above read, "The Foster Memorial Concert, in honor of music that speaks without sound." Backstage, Malene stood in a long midnight blue gown, her hands trembling slightly. Olivia and Jackson stood beside her, both dressed elegantly but radiating warmth rather than formality. "Are you nervous?" Jackson asked with a gentle smile. Malene took a slow breath. "A little," she admitted, "but it feels right." Olivia reached for her hand, her fingers forming a sign that said, "You will do great." Malene squeezed her hand in return. When the announcer introduced her name, the applause was soft but steady. Malene stepped onto the stage and took her seat at the piano. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The hall was silent, yet it was the kind of silence that carried energy, a quiet heartbeat shared by everyone in the room. Then she began to play. The first notes of the silent waltz floated through the air, delicate and full of longing. The melody told the story of her grandmother, of love that survived time, of voices that had been lost and found again. The audience leaned forward as if afraid to miss even a breath of it. In the front row, Jackson watched with his hand resting gently on Olivia's shoulder. The girl's eyes glistened as she followed the rhythm through the vibrations in the floor, her heart understanding every note. When Malene reached the final verse, she slowed, letting each chord linger. It was not just music, it was a conversation across generations, a mother to a daughter, a teacher to a student, a stranger to a friend. And when the last note faded, there was a moment of stillness so profound that it felt holy. Then, the applause erupted, not loud and chaotic, but deep, heartfelt, like gratitude turned into sound. People rose to their feet, clapping and signing applause with their hands, 1,000 silent waves of appreciation. Malene looked toward the crowd and saw Olivia signing, "Beautiful," while Jackson mouthed, "Thank you." She smiled, tears blurring her vision. After the performance, the three of them stood together in the lobby, surrounded by friends, families, and supporters. Reporters asked questions about the foundation, about the music, about the meaning behind it all. Jackson answered simply, "It was never about success. It was about learning to listen again." When the crowd thinned, Malene and Olivia stepped outside for a moment of quiet. Snow had begun to fall, soft flakes catching in Olivia's hair. She looked up at the sky, her breath forming little clouds. "Do you think Grandma can see this?" she signed. Malene nodded, her heart swelling. "I think she never left," she replied. Jackson joined them, his coat dusted with snow. He slipped an arm around his daughter's shoulders, then looked at Malene with the kind of calm gratitude that words could never express. Together, they stood beneath the falling snow, their laughter mingling with the hush of winter. In the distance, church bells rang, their tones drifting through the night like a blessing. Malene looked at the two people beside her, the man who had learned how to listen, and the girl who had taught him how, and she knew the circle was complete. Life had given them back what they thought was lost, not through wealth or power, but through kindness. The lights of the city glowed softly behind them, and for a brief, perfect moment, everything felt still, whole, and deeply alive. As they turned to go, Olivia paused to sign one last phrase into the air. "Love never disappears," she said. "It just learns a new way to speak." And with that, the night carried their laughter away, leaving only the quiet echo of a song that would never truly end. In a world where wealth often silences compassion, this emotional tale stands apart from ordinary millionaire stories. It follows a powerful man, his deaf daughter, and the kind interpreter who teaches them that love speaks louder than money. Through heartbreak, rediscovery, and forgiveness, this story turns silence into music and loneliness into family. It reminds us that not all millionaire stories are about fortune, but about finding humanity in unexpected places. With cinematic emotion and heartfelt redemption, this is one of those rare millionaire stories that restores faith in kindness. From the glow of the gala to the quiet of a piano's final note, it captures the essence of grace, healing, and hope. If you love deeply emotional millionaire stories that inspire the soul, this unforgettable journey will stay with you long after the music fades.